Hey guys, Cecil here once again. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be looking at Sonic during the 32-bit era, mainly during his years on the Sega Saturn. Now, for some of you may not know, Sonic kind of had a dark period. This was in between the time where he rose to prominence during the Sega Genesis and on the Sega CD with the main line of Sonic titles, and his resurrection on the Dreamcast with the Sonic Adventure games. But in between those eras, mainly in the late 90s, there was kind of a downtime for Sonic on the Saturn. Now, Sega was definitely planning on releasing, at least one major Sonic game on the Saturn, but due to the development and running into problems due to the Saturn being so difficult to program for, a mainline Sonic title never actually saw the release never actually saw a release on the Saturn. The main game that was being planned was going to be called Sonic Xtreme. Now I could get into a whole another video on the problems Sonic Xtreme had, and I'll include a link down below in the description about if you want to read more about that. What I'm mainly going to talk about is in this video Sonic 3D Blast. Now Sonic 3D Blast was going to be the replacement for Sonic Xtreme for Christmas 1996 because Sega was having so many problems with Sonic Xtreme development. It was going to fall to the next year, at least at the time. So they retooled Sonic 3D Blast for the Genesis, and in a couple of months they ported it to the Saturn with improved graphics, sound, and things of that nature. Now, I'm not going to really talk so much about the graphics and sound right now. I'll show some gameplay here and upcoming later on in the video, and I'll go over the pros, cons of both versions, things of that nature. And yeah, so why don't we go take a look at, we'll start with Sonic 3D Blast on the Genesis, and then we'll move on to the Saturn version, and at the end I'll just give some impressions, which version's, the better one, what problems did it have, because, a lot of people generally consider this game to be a rather mediocre at best Sonic game. And we'll look into it, why that's the case, and things of that nature. So let's go take a look at Sonic 3D Blast on the Genesis to start here. What you're taking a look at right now is the Sega Genesis version of Sonic 3D Blast, and it does have a little bit of opening FMV that goes with it. Now, for a Genesis cart to have any sort of FMV is actually quite impressive. It is rather low resolution. Excuse me, it's rather low resolution and grainy, but still, to have something like that on a Genesis cart, even in 1996, that was rather impressive. So let's just get right into the game here. You have your basic modes. You have your story mode start, your sound test. You can edit the controls. This is pretty straightforward. Now this version over the Saturn version has a little opening story here. This is not in the Saturn version. It just basically goes over what Dr. Eggman's taking over Flicky's island, and he's capturing all the Flickies so he can take over the island, and it's Sonic's job to free them from his robot creatures. And yeah, it's your pretty typical Sonic story. Sonic's just going to go through each. So there's 7 zones total, and I mean, if you want to pause the video and read all of these frames, you're more than welcome to. But I'm not really going to go so much into the story. So the first zone here is the Green Grove, which is mainly what I'm going to show right now. And as you can see, for a Genesis game, this is quite impressive graphically. The one thing Sonic 3D Blast was not lacking for was really good graphics. The problem with Sonic 3D Blast is the gameplay and the isometric view. Now, I apologize for the graininess or the poor quality of this video if it looks like it, because I'm recording strictly off of a TV. So Sonic's got his typical little animations there when he's staying put, saying, "Hey, let's get moving here." As you can see, the gameplay is kind of isometric, 3/4 down, and the controls definitely take getting used to. Sonic definitely moves around like he's kind of on ice skates. It's kind of loose, not overly responsive. He does have his typical moves: spin dash. You hold down the B button. If you're running and hold down the B button, he'll drop and roll. You don't charge up the spin dash. You just hold it, and he'll bounce around the stadium. So basically, bounce around the level. Now the main goal here is to go through each level and rescue Sonic's little friends, the Flickies. Now they're, like your typical Sonic game, they're all captured in these enemies, and you need to find 5 in each section of the level, and then you find the the warp ring, and it'll once you have 5 flickies, and it will warp you to the next part of the level. There are these little Sonic head icons you can collect. That if you get 10 of them, they're called medals. If you collect 10 of them, they will give you an extra continue, which is kind of nice. And you got your typical item boxes. It's got shields as well. Although not nearly as many from like say Sonic 3 with like the flame shield, the electric shield, things like that. Like I said, as you can see right there, it really takes some getting used to with the controls. It's really easy to mistime a jump, and when you think you're going to land on an enemy, and actually he'll hit you instead, or so it definitely will take some getting used to, especially if you've never played Sonic 3D Blast before. I personally have a decent amount of experience with this. I played through it once a long time ago, at least the Saturn version. I've never actually sat down and played through the Genesis version before. But this is your little warp ring. You'll grab onto it, and all your little flicky buddies will jump in. And if it still stays like that, that means you haven't found all the flickies in this particular area. So you got to keep exploring. Now you definitely do want to get 50 rings if you can, because you got to track down Knuckles and Tails, and Tails will usually be in the first part of the level, at least in the first zone. Tails will be in Act 1, and Knuckles will be in Act 2. And if you can find them, and I'll see if I can't find Tails here, it'll warp you to a special stage. Now the special stages are probably the biggest differences between both the Saturn version and the Genesis version. The Saturn version has actual full 3D rendered graphics, and it's kind of interesting to note that was the first instance that Sonic, one of the first instances at least, where Sonic was fully rendered in 3D. The sounds definitely borrow a lot from the mainline Sonic games, at least in this game, as you can tell, as you could hear by getting 100 rings and you got an extra guy. Now I believe Tails is down around here somewhere if I can find him, and I can kind of show you gameplay of the special stage. Be careful of those mines. If you get too close, they will hit you. Now you can see I'm jumping here, and I can't get this Sonic medal that's jumping here, and that's mainly because you got to get some flickies tailing you that they'll jump a little higher and they'll be able to grab it for you. So I don't have any flickies yet, so I can't get that medal. They're not critical in beating the game, at least as far as getting everything in the game, but it's kind of nice to have. I believe Tails is right here. Now you want to find Tails, and if you have 100 rings, you'll get warped to the special stage. Now, in the Genesis version, you kind of run on a bridge, and you want to avoid the bombs, and like I said, you got to be careful. It's pretty easy to take damage from these bombs. It's definitely different from previous special stages, like on the Genesis, Sonic 2, where you had the half pipe, and Sonic 3, where you had like the little 3D globe world you ran around and you collected the blue orbs. You mainly want to. The goal of this special stage is definitely similar to the ones in Sonic 2, where you got to get a certain number of rings before you hit a checkpoint, and otherwise it'll stop you from advancing through the to the next part of the half pipe, where you eventually want to get all the Chaos Emeralds. This particular one isn't too difficult, but as you advance, obviously, to more special stages, they get much harder. So I did pretty good there, and I got the Sonic Emeralds. Always usually pretty easy to get. Graphically, as you can see, that special stage was quite good for the Genesis. Now we'll move on to the Saturn version here, and I'll show you the what upgrades to sound and things of that nature that port had of this original version, this was the original version of the game. The Saturn version was ported from this. So let's go take a look at the Saturn version now. Okay, now we will move on to the Saturn version. Now I am playing the Saturn version in S-Video. The Genesis version was in AV. So you might notice this looks a little bit better, at least as far as clarity and sharpness goes. So yeah, just be aware that it's just the hardware. And I apologize for the crudeness of this recording. I've got to tape directly off a TV because I really don't have a good way of capturing video from a console directly to a computer or anything right now. I'm kind of doing this the old-fashioned way. So as you can see here, this is the opening FMV for the Saturn version. Definitely much longer and much better clarity, mainly just due to this being a CD-based system. This kind of takes the place of the little story mode that the opening of the Genesis version has. And yeah, it's really well done for 1996, you know, and pretty much just on such short notice. And yeah, I've always liked, you know, how this looks. It, you know, most of Saturn, or most of the FMV they've done for Sega games and with the Sonic franchise in general has been pretty damn good. Now, as you can see, the loading time is the biggest problem, I would say, with this particular version. But that's going to be the case with any cartridge-based game versus any CD-based game. And it's not really that big of a deal as far as you know, detracting from the game overall. It's basically got similar modes: sound test, a help menu, and the start of the story mode. And this, like I said, there's no little opening dealy bob with the story like in the Genesis version. It pretty much throws you right into the mix. It does have this neat little map that the Genesis version. Oh, this has this neat little map that the Genesis version does. This is actually Flicky's Island that Sonic is trying to save from Dr. Robotnik, who has taken it over. And yeah, again, graphically, you'll see a nice bump in how the game looks as a whole. It's not a huge improvement over the Genesis version, but you know, definitely noticeable. You know, more colors, things of that nature, and which is the biggest improvement from any, you know, 32-bit system jumping from a previous generation platform like the Genesis to the Saturn. You know, like you can see how the bridge, you know, collapses under Sonic's weight. That didn't do that in the Genesis port. You know, it's got much more foliage and things of that nature, a lot more little details that the Genesis version has. The floors look a lot more detailed, you know, and again, that's just due to the bump in the hardware that this version has. But yeah, otherwise, gameplay-wise, this is pretty much the same as the Genesis version. Really minimal difference. You can see all these little extra characters that a lot of the Genesis version really didn't have so much. The Saturn version also can take advantage of the 3D control pad, which I just switched to. It makes the game, definitely makes it a little bit easier to control, you know, once you get used to it. And again, this is the kind of game where it does take some getting used to with as far as the controls. I'll do my best here to show you the special stage, which I would say is the biggest difference between the Genesis version and the Saturn port. I just got to make sure I keep all my rings so I can show that to you once I find Tails, and give him 50 rings. You don't have to give Tails or Knuckles, when you find them in the level, you don't have to give them all the rings. You can if you only have like 25, you can give them 25. They'll keep track, so you can come back, you know, once you have more rings in order to see the special stage. And you can just see right there, I took a hit. And when you take a hit, if you have Flickies following you got to go and find them again. But yeah, no, like I said, I think this is a very pretty looking game. The biggest downside is the controls. You can't just go barreling through levels like you could in the Genesis version so much. And again, you can see I'm missing a Flicky, so I got to keep exploring the level. See, and that's where he is. Again, see, it's really easy to lose track of where you are in coordination with an enemy when you're trying to jump on them and kill them. So I got the last Flicky. We'll move on to the next section here. Hopefully I can get enough rings to, again, show you the more awesome special stage that this version has. Okay, as you can see, I found Tails and I had enough rings, so we'll go ahead and show you the special stage here. Now, again, this is where probably one of the very first fully 3D renderings of Sonic that Sega ever did. This along with his appearance, as I mentioned in my last video, Sonic the Hedgehog Into Dreams, where basically its first iterations where, again, he was done fully in 3D with polygons and everything. Now, as you can tell, these are much more radically different than the version, the special stages in the Genesis version of Sonic 3D Blast. Much more like the special stages in Sonic 2, and they basically are the same as that. You know, there's bombs, and you got to collect as many rings by a certain checkpoint in order to advance and eventually get the Chaos Emerald at the end. The first stage is, again, is always the easiest. As you can see, that was 83 rings to 50. There's really very few bombs in this first as first special stage. I rarely, if ever, have had trouble, getting the first Chaos Emerald. The latter ones. I will say though that as you advance through the special stages, they do get much harder. I would say much more so than if you remember the progression of the special stages in Sonic 2. These get much more difficult. Quicker than the special stages in Sonic 2. I've gotten the all 7 Chaos Emeralds in this once. You don't really get to play as Super Sonic if you do, but it does kind of unlock the final special, a final special true battle with Robotnik is kind of an 8th zone. Like I said, there's 7 zones total in this game. But to get to see the true ending, you got to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds. And like I said, it will take practice. Even with all the experience you have in the special stages with Sonic 2, it's definitely a different control, definitely a different feel and look to them. And it is really cool to see Sonic, what he looks like in 3D. Up to this point, it was all just 2D sprites or 2D CGI generated sprites like in this game. But again, here loading is going to be the biggest culprit with the Saturn version, and there's a lot of it. I guess apparently the Japanese version of Sonic 3D Blast, which came out on the Japanese Saturn, has improved loading times. I don't know how true that is or how much they'd be improved. I've never played that version. This didn't come out at the same time as the American version. I guess it came out a few years later, late in the Saturn's life in Japan. But yeah, this is pretty much the Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast. There's more to it. There's more special moves and things of that nature. In later levels that you can do. Based on the stage and whatnot. But this is just to give you a rough idea of what each version looked like. And now we'll move on to my final impressions of both versions and which one I'd recommend you getting if you ever look into getting these either of these versions of the game. Okay, so there you have it. Pretty much that's Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn and the Genesis in a nutshell. So ultimately, which of these versions would I recommend? Pretty much I'm going to recommend the Saturn version. And the big reasons why are mainly for the improvement in graphics, even if it's just slight, and mainly the sound. Now, the soundtrack for the Saturn version here was done by Richard Jock, and he's done a lot of video game soundtracks over the years. And also, the soundtrack on here is Redbook Audio, which means you can put it in a CD player and listen to it whenever. You can't really do that with a lot of other CD-based games, and you can take that and rip it to iTunes and things of that nature. And the soundtrack, I would say, is the best part of this game. Graphically, again, for bringing a port from the Genesis, it's decent. You would definitely expect, at least that from a 32-bit console. And gameplay is where this game ultimately suffers. I can see why a lot of people consider this to be a rather mediocre at best game. I personally like it, but that's just me. Everyone else has varying opinions. I definitely can see where people are coming from when they say this game sucks or isn't very good. If you can get past the slippery controls and the ice skating like controls, there's a lot of fun to be had here. But don't go into this expecting to have some really great 2D run across a level kind of Sonic experience like the classic Sonic games. It's definitely its own unique beast. But there's still, I would say, a lot of fun to be had in either version. This version is probably the version you're going to see on like the Sonic Mega Collection and all those other collections that are out there on more modern systems, and that's mainly because it's all their ports that they're all emulated from the Genesis version. The Saturn version, I haven't checked eBay. It's what this one goes for. It can't be overly expensive, not so much as like Sonic Jam or Sonic R, which I'll explain in the next couple of videos. This would probably, I would say, would be a cheaper Sonic game to get. But yeah, I mean, definitely if you get a chance, try to check either version out. You can't really go wrong with either. If you have a choice, you have a Saturn, you have a Genesis, I would strongly recommend the Saturn version, but the Genesis version isn't bad. So that's basically Sonic 3D Blast. The next game I'm going to talk about in my next video in part 2 is Sonic Jam, which is a compilation Sonic game. And it was kind of an apology to Sonic fans for Sonic Xtreme getting canceled, but I'll get into that a little bit more in the next video. So you guys have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully in the next week or two I'll have another video up here, and I'm going to keep the series going. Like I said, it'll be probably about 3 or 4 videos. So have a good one.